Good day, everybody, and welcome. Thanks so much for joining us for our webinar, Cybercrime in the Age of a Pandemic. We're really excited to have you here today. My name is David Califf. I work in marketing for the team. We have just a whole host of people here today. A special thank you for people who were at the, who are going to be at the Transact conference hosted by the Electronic Transactions Association. That's what we were going to be doing today before the conference was canceled, but unfortunately that didn't work out. We were going to be speaking more broadly on the topic of cybercrime. As it turns out, we think this webinar ended up being really just great timing. It's really targeted, really relevant information, and I think you're really going to like it. So let's go ahead and get started. Originally, we were going to have a webinar that was really geared toward payments folks, but we decided to make this a broader topic. And I see today that we have folks here from law enforcement, internet platforms, e-commerce, shops, advocacy groups, and a whole host of people. So we're really excited. It's really good, relevant content for everybody. Let me just advance our slides here. There we go, just a little delay. Joining me here today is a whole lot of people. Just look at all those lovely faces we've got today. This is our first time doing a panel this large. Some quick introductions. I'm really just excited, and it's nice to see all of you too. I'm glad that I'm glad everyone remembered that it was even Wednesday, because days have lost all meaning to me. We have Karen Nicoletti, our investigative program manager. Our investigative team are the gatekeepers of many of our illicit cybercrime networks. They use advanced research techniques to dig deep into specific cases to help identify various rogue operators. We've got Lily Richardson, Merchant Monitoring Program Manager, and Grant Barba, Merchant Monitoring Senior Analyst. Merchant Monitoring is our team that helps monitor the portfolios of our payment partners to identify merchant activity that is illegal, against terms and conditions, or subject to BRAM and GBPP fines. Those are card brand fines. And then we have Mary Passarelli. She's one of our wonderful analysts on platform monitoring. She represents our many teams that help to monitor the ads and listings and products and social media posts of our internet platform partners. And then I'm David Califf. I am our communications and PR manager and resident fanboy of all of the analysts and the awesome work that they do at LegitScript. As I mentioned, it's the first time we've done a panel, and the reason for it is simple. COVID-19 has really been an all hands on deck effort for us. For the past couple of months, pandemic-related cyber crime and illicit activity has become a focus for pretty much every one of our teams from just a variety of different angles. So when we first thought about this webinar, it was just a real natural fit that we should do a panel so that we could get insight from all of our different teams so they can share the different things that they have been seeing. This is meant to be a casual conversation. We'd really love to take your questions as we go along. So you should see a tab in the little box, the little floating box on your screens. There's a tab that says questions, and anytime throughout the webinar, we welcome you to answer questions or ask questions, and we'll try to answer them. We'll just go through and I'll curate them as we go. So anytime you want, and then if there's time at the end, we'll also take some questions there as well. Let me forward this bad boy. For those of you who don't know a lot about LegitScript, it's your first time on our webinar, I just wanted to give you a little background about who we are and what we do. Essentially, our mission is to make the internet and payment ecosystems safer and more transparent. And we do that in a number of different ways with a variety of different partners. Really, we're experts in cybercrime because it's our goal to minimize the presence of bad actors and create an internet that the public can trust. Let's take a look at some of the partners who we work with in our mission to fight crime. One of the reasons we have such a strong grasp on what's going on in the midst of this pandemic, and really just with cybercrime at large, is because of the diversity of our partnerships. One of our first and most enduring partnerships has been with Google. We originally partnered with them to monitor their advertising platform for illegal online pharmacies. At the time, both Google and Bing, something like 9 out of 10 pharmacy ads on their platforms were problematic in some way. And so we partnered with both of those platforms, and they're now both seeing roughly a 99.8% reduction in these types of problematic ads, so effectively zero. In 2011, we added Amazon to our client list to perform sweeps of its platform. And then in 2013, we partnered with Visa to improve payment processing compliance in banking regarding illicit online pharmacies and other high-risk areas. And then in recent years, we've added clients from both the internet platform space and from the payment space. That includes Shopify, Rakuten, Square. We're really grateful for these partnerships and grateful for these companies who are keeping the internet and payments spaces safe from illicit activity. Our unique knowledge ecosystem has been especially important in the context of the coronavirus pandemic. There's opportunists and bad actors trying to capitalize on the crisis. They've been really popping up whack-a-mole style just all over the place. And in order to stay ahead of them, it's really critical to have a multi-dimensional understanding of both the internet and e-commerce. LegitScript's diversity of partnerships allows us to see things from all angles and industries. And because our clients and our partners include internet platforms and payments and acquirers and government agencies, we have a really unique, broad visibility into the online and payments landscapes. And this helps us to quickly identify trends and stop illicit activity very quickly, sometimes even before it can start. So for example, when we see a bad actor operating on, say, an e-commerce platform, we're then watching and ready for that person when they get kicked off and then try to apply for a merchant account in one of our clients' portfolios. It's that synergy of data that really gives us a great overall view. As you can see here, we do a variety of monitoring, not just in healthcare. Our monitoring encompasses more than 60 high-risk areas and monitoring in more than 80 countries and more than 15 languages. We have native speakers on our staff here of more than 15 languages. Because we monitor a number of different high-risk areas, it's really valuable because crime related to COVID-19 has touched many of these categories. So in some ways, even though our monitoring for coronavirus-related crime is new, it's really a part of what we've already been doing. And I guess that's one of the takeaways we'd like you to leave with today after this webinar. Although crime related to COVID-19 is new, it's many of the same practices and techniques and operators that we're already very familiar with. And this is helpful because although we're talking specifically about cybercrime in relation to the pandemic today, after watching this webinar, you'll really be able to take what you learned today and apply it to future high-risk activity that is not pandemic related. So that's plenty of talking from me. I need to take a sip of my coffee. So let's get to our experts and give them a chance to share. First, we're going to talk about proactive monitoring. Then we'll get into a number of the COVID-19 related cybercrime that our teams have been dealing with, talking about it from a lot of different angles. And then at the end, what I think will probably be the most interesting is that we're going to be talking about what we see happening in the future, because we believe that what you're seeing now is really just the beginning of what is going to be ongoing illicit activity for months and even years. So this is really just the start. First, let's get into proactive monitoring. I like to call it pre-crime, like in the movie Minority Report, like when Tom Cruise knows something's about to commit a crime. There's certain things that we can look for, kind of indicators of crime that is about to happen or is happening. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about the massive surge in domain name registrations related to the virus. Karen from our investigative team, tell us a little bit about why all these sudden registrations and why it's important and what this can tell us.
Yeah, so as you can see here, tens of thousands of domain names have been registered since the start of the coronavirus outbreak, many of them building off of one another, and this is something that is constantly evolving. In the early days, we were seeing a lot of just coronavirus domain names. As this became a pandemic, you got domain names starting to be registered with pandemic or COVID-19. Something that we have been collecting since the start of this outbreak is, the types of products that are being marketed for coronavirus. In this case, it's many test kits, personal protective equipment, certain drugs that are being marketed for coronavirus. And this is something we had some experience with going back to outbreaks of Ebola and Zika, and we're seeing just very similar patterns in terms of what is being registered. It's really centered on the types of products, and we just keep on top of those products to make sure that we're searching more and more for domain names that are registered using those terms. A lot of them are inactive at this point, but we do see some of them come online. We do know that a number of them are used in phishing and malware and things like that, or are being used to market products.
So if you see a domain name registered, but it's parked or offline, we can kind of keep our eye on it to see if it does start showing content.
Exactly.
Let's move on and look at another aspect of proactive monitoring, looking at effectively the usual suspects who inevitably pop their little heads out of their gopher holes whenever there's a crisis, looking for an opportunity. Tell us about some of those.
So yeah, again, going back to our experience with working during the Ebola and Zika outbreaks, we have seen certain companies. These are typically companies that market products that are claiming to cure virtually everything, which is a big red flag in itself. These are products such as Miracle Mineral Solution, which is effectively akin to drinking bleach. There's essential oils tend to be marketed for a lot of different types of conditions and diseases, and things like colloidal silver is that's another product that we see marketed for many different diseases, and COVID-19 is no exception to that. So we basically try to go out, cast our net pretty wide to find these types of products and catch the problematic marketing before it becomes really widespread.
Yeah. Let's look now at some of the problematic products that we have been encountering in our research over the past couple of months. Some of these will be certainly familiar to many of you who are watching, but we've also got some important updates on some of them as well. First of all, the big one, test kits, diagnostic kits. We saw these right off the bat, high-risk test kits, counterfeit test kits seized by the CPB, unapproved test kits. Part of the problem here is that this space is extremely dynamic and changing practically by the day. And I'll throw it over to Grant here from Merchant Monitoring. Tell us a bit about the evolution of test kits and what we've been monitoring in this space over the past couple months.
Yeah, thanks, David. So like you were saying, this really is just a rapidly evolving area, and it's one that we've seen, first of all, just kind of developing over the last month and a half to 2 months with significant law enforcement activity, regulatory scrutiny. As you mentioned right here, the Customs and Border Protection seizures. We've also seen all sorts of law enforcement activity in this space, in addition to regulatory scrutiny from the FTC, FDA, which have been banding together and issuing joint warning letters and going after providers of some of these kits. And so really some of the big risk here is in these times of uncertainty, a lot of people are just desperate to get tested, and so they might turn online to some unscrupulous providers. could provide them products that are either ineffective or potentially even dangerous. And you just really don't know what you're getting out there. And as of now, there are no authorized in-home test kits that can be used exclusively in home, so that there are some that require lab testing. But if a merchant is offering you a test kit, just ship it to your house, you do everything, no medical professionals involved whatsoever, there is no way that's going to be approved or probably even effective. And so because of that, this intense regulatory scrutiny has also prompted the card brands to take action here. And we've seen a lot of card brand activity in the form of BRAM and GBPP notifications coming in. And so this really is just a really high priority area right now.
Yeah, I know we've seen test kits that say, 15-minute rapid test, get your results, in 10, 15 minutes and things like that.
Yeah,
Lily,
it's too good to be true.
Lily, was there anything else that you wanted to add in regard to test kits?
Yeah, I would definitely underscore that the most substantial risk there right now is in-home test kits promising to give you rapid results at home. But one additional thing is that even in cases where the test itself might be approved for sale in a certain jurisdiction, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's okay. You still would want to take a really close look at, are they appropriately restricting shipping? Are they selling it to the people whom they're supposed to be selling it to? Are there additional regulations in the jurisdiction about registration? Basically, any sale of COVID-19 diagnostic test kits is extremely risky right now.
Nice. Let's look at the topic of price gouging. A number of e-commerce platforms have come down hard on price gouging over the past few weeks. I won't tell you how much I paid for toilet paper when I found it at Home Depot a few weeks ago. I was just glad to have it. Grant, what are some of the price gouged items we've been seeing? How has this been changing? Because I know this is also a quickly evolving space as well.
Yeah, so like you were saying, it's kind of shifted from a lot of the sort of preparation products like masks and gloves and hand sanitizer. And while we're still seeing significant volume in those areas, does seem to be moving away from that. For example, early on in the pandemic, we saw merchants selling these kits. There's completely all-inclusive with a full body suit with this gigantic respirator for, as you see, almost $7,000. And that's kind of a prime example. I mean, no one in their right mind would go out of their way to pay that. And we've also been seeing actions from state attorneys general across the United States, and they've been actively enforcing and aggressively enforcing price gouging laws. And in those cases, fines can range from several $1,000s to even jail time in many cases. And so it's really behooves merchants and payment processors to examine this activity and stay on top of it. So what we're seeing now, though, is a lot of merchants moving towards price gouging related to these in-home test kits and bulk sales of these products. So for example, you may see a merchant offering a package of like 20,000 masks. And this is a merchant maybe that their site was set up in the last week or two. They have no greater internet presence. They're really not an established business, and they're selling these bulk kits for maybe $10,000, $20,000 in some cases, or even more. And so that obviously presents significant credit risk and reputational risk as well.
I love that the kit here shown on screen is, I mean, it's almost $7,000, but it does include Diet Coke, and I know some people who, if they got desperate, might consider that. So.
Yeah, all the essentials there.
All the essentials. Health claims. We could spend an entire hour or more just talking about health claims. It's been a major topic, but for all of our sanity, we have distilled it down to just a couple of slides. And I'm going to throw it over here to Mary from our platform monitoring. For those of you who may not be as familiar, Mary, can you just tell us first a little bit about what health claims are, why they're important, and then talk specifically about what we have been seeing in relation to the pandemic and health claims.
Yeah, so a health claim is typically a claim made by a seller or manufacturer that their product will cure, mitigate, or treat a disease or in some way alter the structure or function of the body. These claims are considered impermissible when they aren't backed up by evidence or by science, or at least it's not by the FDA standards. And they can be really harmful because they mislead consumers into thinking that the products that they're buying are going to help them in ways that they probably won't. And I'd say that pretty much across all platforms that we monitor, we've seen huge increases of products being marketed with claims around COVID-19, like this one in the slide we've seen many times. It says that it'll be a cure for COVID-19. It also claims to treat some of the symptoms of COVID-19. Yeah, so we've seen a lot of products like this across all platforms, really.
Nice. And I was waiting for you to point out some of the symptoms, such as lung hotness and greasy fur of tongue. I didn't
Don't think it'll actually treat that.
I will tell you, when you've got a greasy fur of tongue, you will try anything. Quickly before we move on, we've got a question. I don't think any of us will know this, but someone asked, did any attorney general approach any payment provider? And I think this is in regard to price gouging. Did any attorney general approach any payment provider or just the merchants themselves as far as price gouging? I'm not sure we're aware of anyone approaching a payment provider, but Grant or Lily, have you heard anything that you're able to share?
Not specifically, no, but I would say that that's definitely not off the table as a risk. Certainly, this is something that has been a top priority for various attorneys general in various states. And if there are certain providers that are continuously kind of involved with this, then that's a substantial risk for sure.
Awesome, thanks. Moving on and back to the topic of health claims and its close association with warning letters. Part of the reason why health claims are so important, I would just refer you to the website of the FTC or the FDA. They have been aggressively cracking down on merchants who are making unsubstantiated or impermissible health claims in relation to COVID-19. There have been dozens since the last time I checked, but it seems like there are new ones every few days. Common products include teas, CBD, essential oil, colloidal silver, aromatherapy, stem cell therapy. More recently, I read high dose vitamin C was called out, as well as ozone therapy, and I'm not even sure exactly how that works, but it sounds interesting. In the images you see here, claims have been called out both on merchant websites and on social media that a merchant controls. If you look above the top image, a claim on social media is for a colloidal silver product. This was called out in really, I think, like the first round of warning letters. And we went online and were able to see that the claim was still live at the time that we reviewed it. And then below is a claim we pulled from a website, also was still live at the time that we viewed it. A claim for a website selling antioxidant strips, and I'm not sure what those are. They look kind of like a gross tasting Listerine breath strip, but I can't say for sure because I've never tried it. They had a coronavirus claim, and then just to add insult to injury, they have some statements around their product potentially inhibiting the HIV virus and killing cancer cells. So kind of a whole bunch of stuff. At LegitScript, we are looking at so many products and websites and listings all day long in regard to claims and strange products that it does get a bit silly sometimes. I would love any panel member who wants to share their favorite, strangest product or claim they have come across. I'll share my favorite, which is a facial brush that was actually called out. I had to look it up to even understand what a facial brush is, because I was picturing like a comb across your face or something. And the claim was, ramp up your beauty and cleaning regimen, fight off corona, which, I mean, bonus points for multitasking, but also strange. Anyone else have one that they would like to share?
Yeah, David. So probably the weirdest marketing that I saw was essentially sound healing MP3s. You would download this probably atonal sound MP3, and it would boost your immunity. So it boost your immunity against the coronavirus. a little bit of a weird one.
So you create a Spotify playlist around that. Anyone else want to share any?
Well, and combining a little bit of price gouging and some impermissible claims, we had a merchant that we saw that was offering a decontamination chamber where the customer would pay $3,000 to be decontaminated and cured of their coronavirus. So, get two birds with one stone there.
Yeah, nice. We have a question. Have you seen any online vendors selling or claiming to sell hydroxychloroquine? That is perfect timing because we are just about to get into that. Another product that we have been seeing, at least sold or marketed online, are unapproved drugs. These have really been in the spotlight lately for a variety of reasons. Broadly speaking, we've seen a surge in interest in antiretrovirals and antibacterial drugs. We see them in a number of areas, most frequently on rogue internet pharmacies, which we're going to get into in our next section. Also on B2B e-commerce platforms. In the screenshots here, you see a rogue internet pharmacy at the top. At the bottom is a listing on a prominent e-commerce platform. It's a little small, but the headline there reads, high purity API, 99% azithromycin for COVID 2019. It's important to note that a number of B2B platforms are hands-off and not necessarily vigilant about enforcement of their merchants. And just generally speaking now, all of these merchants ostensibly only sell to businesses. Our undercover analysts have throughout the years repeatedly identified merchants and manufacturers who state that they will sell to individuals. So it's definitely a potential problem area. These merchants may sell prescription-only drugs or active pharmaceutical ingredients in bulk without requiring a prescription. And they are especially difficult to enforce if the B2B platform is non-compliant and or the platform and merchant are based overseas. Let's look though at a really big topic, rogue internet pharmacies. We've got a lot to say on this topic. It's something that's one of our specialties at LegitScript and has really come into the spotlight because of the issue of unapproved drugs. So I'm going to throw it over to Karen. First of all, Karen, tell us how rogue internet pharmacies have pivoted in the midst of the pandemic.
Yeah, so what we see typically with rogue internet pharmacy networks is they're pretty savvy marketers. They know not only what drugs are popular in the news, they also know kind of how to increase their search engine optimization. So typically what we've been seeing is certain large networks in the rogue internet pharmacy space have been rushing to add products to their catalogs, products such as antiretrovirals, antibiotics, and some of them are marketing specifically for COVID-19. Some of them are using some little weird tricks that I think Lily is going to go over later. So during this kind of public health crisis, they know exactly how to drive traffic to their websites. And I gave the example of BenghaziPharmacyCialis.com. Obviously, this is not the local Benghazi pharmacy. This is just one example of multiple domain names that have been registered in the past when Benghazi was in the news a lot. Typically, the affiliate managers know how to drive traffic to their websites. They know what terms internet users are searching for, and they're just looking to get traffic to their websites. And so during the COVID-19 pandemic, we've seen a lot of, keywords, obviously the COVID and coronavirus keywords. And if you'll go to the next slide, David. We see a lot of kind of like focusing on polarizing or divisive topics in this large internet pharmacy network. Essentially from the very beginning, they were kind of taking a page from the misinformation playbook, posting on their blog that COVID-19 was a hoax, and that, by the way, if you maybe get an inkling that it's not a hoax, you could buy some of our antibiotics by clicking here. And then they kind of shifted over the next few weeks into claiming that there was now a cure. And of course, they cited chloroquine as the cure being used against COVID-19. This is when chloroquine was making all kinds of headlines. You know, we've been staying on top of drugs that have been publicized as used in trials for COVID-19. And, you know, this is one that has picked up a lot of speed. And, you know, what they're doing essentially is, you know, trying to capitalize on those high value search terms to drive people to the website. And so we know that some of these networks are stalking the products. We've seen in Russian language affiliate forums, affiliates are talking about, you know, where they can get their hands on these products and which affiliate programs are stocking these products. And so we've been watching closely what's happening there and seeing that these internet pharmacy affiliate networks are adding the products to their websites.
So some of these rogue internet pharmacies may be marketing the product to drive traffic to their website. Others appear to actually be selling the product. Is that right?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
And I think there's been a lot of discussion as well about you know, which products are unavailable for export, which products are unavailable at all. You know, with India's lockdown, Coletra was one that became unavailable. This is something that we even saw the affiliate managers talking about in some forums.
Let's look a little bit more at how they're marketing their websites. We started off talking about domain name registrations. Lily, how are rogue internet pharmacies making use of new domain names to drive traffic and market themselves?
Yeah, so one thing we've seen is people registering like a lot of kind of flashy high value domain names with things like chloroquine or COVID in them with the intention of using them, not specifically to host problematic content, but to drive traffic to websites where they might be offering their products or selling chloroquine. One example on this slide is the domain name chloroquine24.com. It was registered in March 2020, just as the situation was really escalating. And what the website operator did here was just like stuff this website with metadata related to using chloroquine to treat COVID-19. And they did such a good job of it that at one point this website was like ranked first in search results for people who were searching for using chloroquine to treat COVID-19. But when you, the internet user, clicked on this link, it would take you to this page on a rogue pharmacy that is purporting to sell chloroquine, but as you can see from the screenshot, they've really been around for a while, like primarily in the business of selling Viagra. So essentially, I think the main takeaway here is if you're looking to bring on a merchant, just because you've analyzed the website doesn't necessarily mean that you've seen the full picture of their marketing. Oftentimes they could be driving really problematic traffic from some other source, and that's definitely a technique that we've seen used across the board and definitely specifically with rogue pharmacies.
All right, come for the chloroquine, stay for the Viagra. Another technique that we have been seeing rogue pharmacies use is hijacking. This is a common technique to improve SEO. Mary, you've been seeing this in platform monitoring. Tell us a little bit about it, would you?
Yeah, so hijacked websites are pretty much exactly what they sound like. They're websites that have been hijacked by bad actors who inject their content, so to speak, onto otherwise innocuous websites. So what we've been seeing a lot in a lot of our search engine platforms is websites advertising with high-risk keywords like azithromycin, like this one does. And then when you click on the ad itself, it'll take you to a rogue pharmacy. But when you go directly to the website, it's something completely unrelated to pharmacies or to drugs. And so typically, and so we've seen a big increase in websites advertising with prescription drug terms like azithromycin, hydroxychloroquine, and then there's also been some animal drugs that have been promoted as COVID cures by these websites, and they're just trying to get traffic to their websites by avoiding detection by instead of just advertising using the rogue pharmacy domain.
Mm-hmm. let's look too at social media and how it is being used by rogue internet pharmacies. It's been a major avenue for illicit sales, and then also the spread of misinformation. Mary, tell us a little bit about what your team has been seeing.
Yeah, so social media, I think in general, has just been a hotbed for spreading misinformation. But lately, we've seen rogue pharmaceutical suppliers and rogue pharmacies promoting their websites by claiming that the drugs that they sell are also effective to treat coronavirus or COVID-19. So like, for example, this one claims that these HIV/AIDS meds that they have will also treat coronavirus. And again, this is just like a tactic used to try to get more traffic to their website. And then on the other hand, there's also the issue of individuals promoting this information. So this was just something I thought was kind of funny, is someone claiming that the government or the media is hiding the vaccine for us, but really it's just a vaccine for cattle that treats a totally different virus, different strain of coronavirus at least.
Yeah, but misinformation can certainly be a danger, and if at the very least a reputational risk for the platform that's hosting that content. I think that social media platforms have a kind of triple threat. They have the threat of misinformation. They have health claims up the wazoo tend to appear on social media pages, and then the prospect of illicit sales if someone's driving traffic to their website. So any social media companies trying to keep their platforms clean and be responsible certainly have their work cut out for them. Thanks for that. Oh, and now we're going to move on to scams and frauds. One of my favorites, just because we get to feature the shadowy hoodie figure. He's a great friend of ours. He appears frequently in our webinars. We've seen a number of different scams. First of all, let's talk a little bit about non-delivery schemes. It's something that the investigative team is well versed in. Karen, tell us a little bit about, just explain for those who might not know what non-delivery schemes are, and then what we've been seeing in relation to the pandemic.
So a non-delivery scheme is typically going to be a website that markets a lot of products, and they're going to focus on usually controlled substances, opioids, as well as street drugs like LSD, crystal meth, things like that. And then they will essentially take payment for these products and then never deliver anything. They're essentially just ripping you off. They tend to favor wire transfers and gift cards as payment. And they'll typically be recognizable by the sometimes garish website design, the kind of bizarre products such as Rick Simpson oil or Activist promethazine codeine cough syrup, things like that. They use falsified addresses. So if you were to Google an address on one of these websites, you might get the address of a frozen yogurt shop, things like that. So what we've been noticing is that I think it's very easy for them to just add products that are, again, making headlines for being used as trials in against COVID-19, like chloroquine, hydroxychloroquine, and other products, zinc even, and azithromycin. So, I think that the people who are running these scammy websites just are seizing the opportunity to add these products, hoping to get more search traffic and things like that.
There are a number of websites and forums, customer complaint boards that are always good to check before you're buying something online. Although of course we should be buying something that is FDA approved for its use as well. Let's look at donation scams. Lily, tell us a little bit about what you've been seeing, and then also what we can do to give an assessment of whether a fundraiser is acting in doing what it says it's going to be doing.
Yeah, so donation scams, unfortunately, are something we see frequently cropping up in the wake of things like natural disasters. And because there is just so much fundraising in general during these large-scale emergencies, it can be kind of like looking for a needle in a haystack to figure out which ones are genuine and which ones aren't. We can't say for sure through open source research whether something is fraud or not, but there are some universal risk factors for scams. Similar to what Karen was describing, definitely anyone who is trying to do fundraising and then asking you to pay via something like a gift card or even things like cash or wire transfers can be risky too. And also just doing like ridiculous and flashy things in order to pressure you into donating, that's a risk as well. But I would say sort of the best thing we can do through just open source research is just look at the basic who, what, why, when, and where. Does this form a coherent narrative? So we'll want to just ask ourselves, like, who is asking for the money? What's their relationship to the beneficiary? When will the funds be delivered? What exactly are they going to be used for? This screenshot here is an example of one that just raises giant question marks on all accounts. Supposedly this is a fundraiser for new pneumonia, which I don't know what that is, but I'm pretty sure I don't want it. I don't know who Good Wuhan from Paris, California is, and I guess mask giving is an admirable aim, but it's just not really specific enough that I would want to donate to them. So obviously this is like a really atrocious example, but generally speaking, because there's so much out there, there are a surprising number of fundraisers out there that look just like this. So just doing those basic checks can really just weed some of those out.
Poor Good Wuhan has raised $0 so far. So I guess credit to the public for not being fooled by her mask giving. All right. And then no value added services. We have seen this popping up. It's a common problem that I know the merchant monitoring team faces, a really scammy service. Grant, just explain what they are, first of all, for those who may not be familiar, and then what you've been seeing.
Yeah, so a no value added service is generally a merchant who is claiming some sort of government affiliation or is claiming to help customers facilitate some sort of government service that the customer themselves could actually obtain easily or for free themselves. And so essentially they're just inserting themselves as a middleman into a transaction that really doesn't need to exist. They're really essentially providing nothing whatsoever to the consumer and are just charging a hefty fee. And in some cases, they're actually being actively misleading about their own government affiliation or their ability to maybe help streamline a process or get something done more quickly. And so it can be very deceptive, and there's significant risk here. And what we've been seeing in merchant monitoring have been a lot of merchants coming out claiming to help customers processing things like small business loans, with governments around the world offering stimulus money in various forms. We've seen these merchants in the United States and in the EU to be able to claiming to help customers with those loan applications, with things like getting stimulus money from the government in whatever local jurisdiction it may be, things like small business loans. All of those are really high target areas. And the FTC has also put out notices about this, and this is obviously presents risk and is just defrauding customers.
Yeah, I just remember reading last week them sending out a statement about a website they'd cracked down on, claiming to help facilitate the small business loan.
Exactly,
issue.
that's been huge. That's probably been the main one we've been seeing in the U.S.
Yeah. We have, at LegitScript, a really great repository of educational information. We've got a guide on no value added services. If some of you watching would like to learn more about those, in the chat function, you can just type no value added guide or NVA guide, and someone will follow up with you. And I meant to mention too, we got a great guide on hijacking. If you're interested in learning more about that, you can just type in hijacking guide into the chat feature, and we will send you that guide as well. Thanks, Grant. Quick note on payment processing, because payment processing is so important. It's really like one of the critical gateways that can be locked to prevent cybercrime. If a criminal has no way of accepting payment, then it becomes really almost impossible for them to commit their crime. So that's why vigilance from the payments community is so important. So I just wanted to take a moment to talk about what we've been seeing in this space. As far as processing, folks are really using the same tricks that we see in so many other forms of cybercrime. if they can't get a merchant account or if it gets terminated. Lily, for those who may not be familiar, just explain what transaction laundering is and then what you've been seeing.
For sure. So transaction laundering is something that's been around in the e-commerce space for a while. It's basically when someone who is selling really bad or violative products and they know they're not going to be accepted if they just come in at face value. They'll set up sort of a fake online storefront that might be selling something really innocuous, like clothes or electronics or jewelry, and they'll basically use that as a guise to get the merchant account when in fact they are processing payments for illicit products or services. So this is something that we have been tracking for quite a while, and pretty much immediately have also started to see with certain merchants marketing products for COVID-19, specifically unapproved test kits, I would say are sort of the biggest risk area, just because like they're so in demand and generally speaking very illegal. So the people who are involved in selling those products are going to take some deceptive measures in order to gain access to payment processing. So generally speaking, we've kind of seen the same tactics that we've seen before. One of the more common strategies for transaction launderers is to set up this sort of like false storefront through a dropshipping website, just offering like a really generic product lineup.
And that is a great segue into dropshipping used for transaction laundering, something that I know you've been seeing. Grant, why don't you share a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and so quick background for those who may not be familiar, dropshipping is an increasingly common business model for e-commerce merchants, where the merchant is actually never in direct control of the products that they're selling. So they're able to quickly set up a template storefront and then start offering products directly from warehouses in places like China that the merchant actually never touches the products they're selling. All of the shipping and whatnot is handled by a third party who then ships the product directly to the customer. And so in the age of frictionless onboarding, it's very easy to set up these accounts very, very quickly and sell a generic array of products. And this obviously presents significant risk for transaction laundering because you'll see, for example, in this picture here, the products are just very generic. It's just a completely template site. Very little thought or effort went into putting it together, but there's a lot of ways that merchants can use these templates to obfuscate their activity, such as placing violative or unapproved or dangerous products farther back in the product list, so they may be then accessible via backlinks or some sort of redirect, like what Lily was talking about earlier with that link to the page that had been previously selling Viagra. And so for particularly risky products, that may be something to look out for, things like unapproved test kits that are just buried, because a lot of these dropshipping templates are set up to host hundreds, if not even thousands of products. And so sorting through all of those can be very onerous. And when via backlinks, the customers could be easily redirected to those violative products. And so these ready-made templates really make this a very, very attractive type of business model for cyber criminals to use. And I think this also kind of underscores the need for kind of a holistic approach to monitoring these merchants, looking at kind of assessing the greater internet presence, things like their social media presence, because there may not be actual claims on the website itself, but a lot of those claims may be made elsewhere. Or you may kind of get an inkling of some of the problematic marketing or the other ways in which traffic is being redirected to that site.
Nice. We do have a guide on drop shipping, also a great guide on transaction laundering. So if you would like to learn more about either of those, in the chat tab, you can just write drop shipping guide or transaction laundering guide, and we'll get that over to you. I know we have just about 12 minutes left, so I want to make sure we make time for what I think is the most interesting section we have here, of just future threats that we're seeing, because really no product or service a cyber criminal offers is just stopping here in the midst of the pandemic. We really see a long tail, kind of like cascading effect that will go on for really months and possibly even years. So Grant's going to talk a lot about this. First of all, what problematic products we see in the near future and down the road. Grant?
Yeah, I think like you say, David, the tail of this is going to continue for a long time. Things like the unapproved test kits as production of these ramps up. And I mean, obviously we've seen some developments from the FDA with the approval process, but it will probably be some time before actually fully in-home test kits are ever approved and they're deemed to be effective and whatnot. So continue to be on the lookout for those. And that's something, like we said, that we've been seeing significant law enforcement, regulatory, and card brand scrutiny in that area. So that's probably the highest risk thing that we consider to will remain a threat for the foreseeable future. And I think the health claims are something that we really need to keep an eye out on as well. One area, especially given the kind of regulatory ambiguity about the state of CBD, that's something that we've seen a lot of kind of uncertainty about, particularly in the payment space, as payment processors are kind of adapting their policies in light of kind of a lack of clarity on the federal level and on state levels of how to deal with those. So, but we have been seeing the FDA calling out CBD claims related to COVID-19. And so those merchants pose elevated risk as well, in addition to obviously normal supplement merchants and others offering those kinds of products. And one thing also that I wanted to mention are multi-level marketing schemes and products. Recently, I believe it was last Friday, there was a notification from the FTC that called out specifically some kind of more common MLM providers like doTERRA, which offers essential oils. And just as people may be losing their jobs or facing economic hardship, these multi-level marketing scams could be kind of preying on people's vulnerability in these times. So that could pose elevated risk as well, and significant risk for consumer harm.
Yeah. Let's talk about the telemedicine space, which is really just shifting so much right now.
Yeah, this really has been shifting, and essentially what we're seeing here are basically all sorts of health professionals, ranging from mental health services, counseling, things like addiction treatment, drug prescription, kind of you name it, related to medical services. We're seeing these pivoting to offering their services online and shifting to a telemedicine model. And so this, there have been a lot of regulations around this, and there still are, but with this rapid shift, there's a lot of risks that these merchants may pose. And so there are a lot of kind of common and more low-risk third-party platforms, but merchants that may be offering these services through their own platform or kind of have their own kind of in-house offering, especially related to drug prescribing. There are very strict regulations around that. So that's a particularly high-risk area to watch out for with telemedicine. And honestly, with people's uncertainty during and after the worst of this pandemic, maybe whenever that comes, I think we'll continue to see significant shift toward telemedicine offerings in the US and internationally. On this note, quickly, just worth mentioning some esoteric and maybe alternative medicine providers, or things like psychic or occult services. As people are looking for kind of clarity and guidance in these difficult, uncertain times, people may also be more susceptible or interested in those kinds of services as well. And those obviously present more significant risk of chargebacks and generally fall into higher risk categories as well. So yeah, just kind of keep an eye out for these fly-by-night operations popping up. We're just seeing incredibly increased volume of these merchants. So this is really something to keep an eye on.
As many of you know who are familiar with LegitScript, in addition to weeding out bad actors, we also help to verify legitimate providers through our certification programs. We have one for addiction treatment, pharmacies, CBD, supplement websites, and also telemedicine. So one of the things that LegitScript is doing is through May 8th, we are waiving our expedited fee for telemedicine providers who are trying to get up and running quickly because of this surge in demand. So they apply for certification at the normal fee and they can have their expedited fee waived. It's just a service that LegitScript is providing to really help the legitimate providers get up and running quickly. A lot of financial services to be aware of. Grant, tell us a little bit about some of those.
Yeah, so we've touched on some of these, particularly the small business loan applications, things like merchants offering to expedite customers' IRS stimulus checks. So all those no value added services, I think that's really something to keep an eye on during this and as the crisis continues. Just especially because of these services' tendency to prey on vulnerable populations, maybe people who aren't as internet savvy, like the elderly, or people who may be in a more difficult legal status, like immigrants and whatnot, could be much more susceptible to falling victim to these services. And in the broader financial services category, I think lending and other credit services are something to keep an eye on as people may be needing to take on more debt or deal with their debt. A lot of people may be seeking to take advantage of that with things like credit repair services or other kind of predatory debt consolidation practices as well. And with this many people out of work too, things like job hunting or resume help services are something to keep an eye on as well. And finally, it's probably worth mentioning get-rich-quick schemes are something that LegitScript has historically monitored and something that we predict significant increases in as well. With people looking for miracle cures and kind of wanting to believe in the fantasy of things getting better, there's a lot of hope out there and a lot of opportunists wanting to capitalize on that.
Yeah. And weapons, this is one that I hadn't even been on my radar. Tell us a little bit about what is to look out for here.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something last month, gun sales in the United States, it was the second highest month ever recorded for gun sales in the United States based on analysis of federal data. And so just generally with people being this uncertain and kind of fearing the worst and fearing potential societal collapse or disorder, things like that, a lot of the preppers and people are just going out and buying weapons, and a lot of first-time gun owners going out and buying weapons, thinking that they need to protect themselves and their family or whatnot. So things like keeping an eye on ghost guns, particularly, that's something that's a really high risk weapons related category that we see in merchant monitoring. And so merchants may be selling what on the surface look like innocuous components, but basically you can buy an assault rifle in components and get it shipped to jurisdictions where that's highly restricted or entirely illegal.
And then Lily, I'll throw this last one to you. You'd mentioned this. Payments companies are usually good at monitoring their new merchants, but you had brought up the idea of also returning to and looking at their older, more established merchants.
Yeah, definitely. This is something I think is super important. Obviously, there is a proliferation of new accounts selling all kinds of nonsense. But what we've also seen are sort of two things. One of which is merchants that were selling things like personal protective equipment that previously would have been kind of lower risks now has just substantially higher risk associated with it. And we've also seen people who historically had product lineups that were totally fine, especially kind of in the drop shipping vein, just people selling like, random consumer junk like fidget spinners, suddenly adding like coronavirus test kits into their product lineup, or just really wild stuff just popping up into existing catalogs. Additionally, like businesses that weren't historically primarily e-commerce based are now trying to pivot to that really quickly. So you might have, for instance, like a medical spa that's trying their best, but like inadvertently is now selling prescription drugs online without requiring a valid prescription. So there's all kinds of risk associated with sort of existing established merchants, not just the new ones that are cropping up.
Yeah, a really good point. We are just at about time now. Just before we end, I wanted to point out a special report we recently released on COVID-19 and the outbreak of cybercrime related to it. It's a really great supplement to a lot of the topics that we've talked about today, and it's a nice resource to keep on hand. You can download that at legitscript.com/COVID-19-report. Again, that's COVID-19-report. Just as important, we encourage you to sign up for our monthly newsletter. We offer a new guide every month to assist you and your team in ongoing education. Coming up, we have guides on geo-targeting, typo squatting, social media scams, a whole bunch of really good stuff. You can sign up for that at legitscript.com/newsletter. Again, legitscript.com/newsletter. And we're right at time, so that'll do it. Thank you for those of you who asked questions and asked for guides. We'll follow up with that. We hope all of you have a wonderful day. Thank you for being here with us, and stay healthy as well. And thanks so much from the whole LegitScript panel. We appreciate you being here today too. Bye-bye.